Hey, so today I'm going to be talking about the struggles that we've had moving from Japan back to the US. Now, there are small struggles like my driver's license expiring and having to start from zero, which kind of sucked. But today I'm going to be focusing on three things. First is banking and money. Two is being a creator on YouTube. And three is having an Apple account. Even though we prepared and really tried to do the best that we can to make sure that we could make this move as smoothly as possible and have this international life, there are things that we overlooked or just didn't know, made mistakes on, and so on. So if you're thinking about moving abroad at some point, especially to Japan, or maybe you live in Japan now and are thinking about moving home in the future, I hope this gives you an idea of some of the issues that you might run into so that you can prepare and avoid them as best as you can. And if you don't fall into either of those categories, you can just take this as one of those what you may not know about Japan videos. So I'm going to start with banking because it's arguably the biggest issue that we've run into here because we can't access our money. Now, how did we get into this situation? Let me explain by starting with my wife's situation. So my wife's main bank account is with UFJ, which is one of the major banks in Japan. As with most banks in Japan, if you are going to be overseas, you have to pay a fee to do international things with it, such as make international bank transfers. But we figured that we'd be using a service called Wise. If you live abroad, you are probably pretty familiar with this. It allows you to make international bank transfers for a lot cheaper than if you were to go directly through a bank or through another service. And the way that they do it is that you transfer money to the domestic Wise account and they deposit that amount into your international bank account. So technically there is no international bank transfers that we're going to be doing from the UFJ account. So because we thought that we don't really need that international feature, we don't really want to pay that extra fee to be able to do so. But unfortunately, it seems that you're not really even allowed to be overseas if you're not paying that fee if you want to continue using her bank account. So what happened was that my wife was here and then she tried to make a domestic bank transfer in Japan with her account and she was immediately locked out of her app. And to try to unlock that account would probably be a pretty tedious process because things are a lot more analog as far as checks go in Japan, and that's especially true with banks. Now, in my case, I closed my UFJ bank account, which was my main one, because when I signed up, they made a mistake and they switched my first and last names. Luckily, I didn't ever have any problems using my bank account while I was there, but I just wanted to make sure that my bank was 100% correct before leaving the country. So I decided to cancel that account and use my second bank account, which I had at the bank, Yucho Bank. And by the way, if you are wondering maybe why we didn't consolidate into one account, like a joint account, and then just streamline things or something like that, it's because they don't exist in Japan. You're not allowed to have joint accounts. You're not allowed to have a second account at the same bank. So that doesn't exist in Japan, and that's why we didn't or couldn't do that kind of thing. So anyways, I decided to use the second Yucho bank account as my main one going forward. What I forgot to do or didn't realize was that even if you have a bank account and you went through the checks in order to make that account and deposit money, link credit cards to it and so on, to be able to use the suite of features that you might be able to use at that bank, you have to go through a separate set of checks. So in my bank's case, there's a way such as downloading a second app from the bank and doing like a face scan and submitting some paperwork in order for me to make even a domestic bank transfer. And so because I didn't do that, I am not able to transfer at all, even using that Wise service. Now, these types of checks are pretty common in Japan, especially with anything to do with money. It's not like in the US where they'll like send you a code and you just confirm what code they sent you, or they'll make a small little deposit into your bank account and you confirm how much they deposited. There are things like you have to take a picture of your ID, a little bit elevated and angled up on the table with a paper next to it with a handwritten number code that they sent you, or you have to take a selfie with your ID and then another one showing the thickness of your ID card, and then other selfies where they'll randomly generate directions that you'll face in, and you have to keep taking pictures of yourself facing different directions. So it's a lot more tedious than it is in most cases in the US. But anyways, because I didn't do this with my Utro account, and because I closed my UFJ account, I can't really access the money that's in that account until the next time I go back to Japan. I think that's the only way that I'll be able to handle this at this moment. But luckily, I do have a credit card that's linked to my Utro bank account, and it seems to work at most places here. So I've been using that, and it automatically gets paid in full. So luckily, I am able to do that. Plus, we have family support, which we're really thankful for. But yeah, that's the situation when it comes to our money and banking after moving back to the US. Now, the second issue is going to affect creators, especially on YouTube. So my channel is monetized, which happens after you reach a certain level, and it makes you eligible for payments for the ads that are run during your video. You get paid through this thing called Google Adsense, and that money gets put into your bank account. All you have to do is register your identity, tax information, and you link your bank account pretty much, and you're good to go. Now, I, as an American on YouTube, had to make sure that I registered my US tax info, even though I was living in Japan. But when I moved back to the US, I wanted to switch my bank account so that my payments would go into my US bank account. But unfortunately, that's not allowed. I didn't know that when you create a Google AdSense account, it is permanently linked to the country that you're in. So even though I'm an American and I registered my US tax info, it is not able to switch to any kind of US bank account. It is firmly locked into Japan. The only solution that I've come across and that I'm aware of is that I would have to create another Google AdSense account in the US, cancel the previous AdSense account in Japan, and then request that the new account gets linked to my YouTube channel. And that verification can take a couple days to a couple weeks, what I'm reading. I haven't done it yet. And during this time that this process is going on, you don't get money that for the ads that are being run during that time. Now, finally, Apple. I use an iPhone, use a Mac. I'm in the Apple ecosystem. You might not know it, but the Apple ID is not universal. It is tied to a country. So my main account is a US one because I used Apple before I moved to Japan. But I realized while living in Japan that I couldn't get certain apps that would be useful for living life in Japan, because some of the apps that are available on the Japan App Store are not available in the US App Store. And that's the only one that I had access to. So for example, I couldn't get the Yahoo Transit app, which is one of the most commonly used train and bus schedule apps in Japan. PayPal, if you want to use PayPal in Japan, it's a different app and a different verification process, different account really than in the US. PayPay, which is probably the biggest cashless payment system in Japan, is only on the Japan App Store. Rakuten is different in the US than Japan. Mercari or Mercari is also completely different in the US and Japan. So there are things that you can't get if you only have a US Apple account and you want to live in Japan. So I had to create an Apple ID for the Japan App Store. And this was always an issue because you have to keep logging in and logging out to download and update apps. And it becomes a little bit of a hassle and it kind of messes up your settings. So it's a pain, and I already was dealing with this, but I ran into an issue after I came back to the US because I couldn't update my bank apps in order to access my bank when I was trying to see if I could actually do stuff with my bank account. When I logged out of my US Apple account and tried to log in with my Japan one, something must have set a flag off because they sent a code to my phone. Unfortunately, the phone number attached to my Japan Apple ID was my Japan phone number, which I canceled when I moved out. So I didn't have access to my Apple account. So what I did and what you have to do is go through the account recovery process. So you answer a few questions to verify, and then you get notified that you're going to get a message exactly 2 weeks from the time you submit that request to the hour and to the minute, actually, to notify you that you are able to finish the process of doing the account recovery. So there's about a 2-week window where you really can't access anything. Now, luckily, they let me finish the account recovery and link my US phone number with my Japan Apple ID. So it's pretty smooth so far. But this inability to switch countries, even though you're using international global services such as Apple, such as YouTube and Google, it's not only an issue with these companies, it's with other companies as well, like Line, which is the biggest messenger service in Japan. You would have to go through this long process, pretty much uninstall the app and go through this whole process to get your account back and link it to a US phone number. So I assume that I'm going to be running into a lot more issues going forward, especially now that a lot of checks do go through your phone number. But yeah, if I run into any more issues that I think might be of value to share, I will share them. If you found this interesting or if you found this potentially valuable, leave a thumbs up. Tell a friend if you have someone you know that might be in a situation where this would be helpful to them. But I appreciate you watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.